Hey guys, Lytane here, and every now and then a movie gets a sequel that nobody saw coming. Whether it's an unpopular movie that gets a sequel, or maybe it's just a big span of time in between movies. One movie that really wanted a sequel, and a lot of people were asking for a sequel, did get one eventually, but it has nothing to do with the original movie, really at all. So today I want to have a look at 10 Cloverfield Lane and see if it's worth it. 10 Cloverfield Lane is the sequel to Cloverfield, a movie that I reviewed not too long ago. Now, even though it's considered a sequel, it has almost nothing to do with the original movie at all. This is set in what has now become known as the Cloververse. This has some themes, ideas, and other connections to the other movie in the series, but most of these are outside of the movie. One amazing thing about the Cloverfield movies is the alternate reality game, or ARG, that surrounds the film. I talked about it in relation to the first movie, so you should really see that episode to get caught up. Just before this movie came out, some of the old websites started to be updated in order to connect it through to the Togoroto network. It added some lore to the series and made it turn into a real universe. Now onto the main movie. 10 Cloverfield Lane was released in 2016, a full 8 years after the first movie, and it has a drastically different plot. Michelle, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead of Scott Pilgrim fame, is on her way home when she is in a car accident. She wakes up in a strange room and instantly jumps to some pretty scary conclusions. Someone has taken her and locked her up. She tries to get out only to be confronted by Howard, played by John Goodman. She attacks but just can't quite escape due to the fact that she is in a bunker and it's all locked up. Howard tries to calm her down and show her that he is friendly, and he tells her that she can stay with him, seeing as how the end of the world has happened. Also in the bunker is a man named Emmett who seems to back up this story, so maybe it's true? But something is just off about this whole thing. Can Howard be trusted? Is it the end of the world, or is Howard keeping them locked up because he is crazy? Maybe they should try calling the neighbors at number 8. I don't know, that's probably a good idea. 10 Cloverfield Lane is a thriller set in a very enclosed environment. There are very few sets and areas in this movie because it all takes place in the bunker. So basically we see a couple of rooms like Michelle's room and Emmett's room, and then the lounge room and the kitchen, and it's all interconnected and there's not really a whole lot of stuff to see. Because of this, it is the plot and the characters that really drive this film. If you do not have a good plot, if you do not have a good characters, then this is just going to be a boring movie because there's not very many dynamic shots that you can do. Sure, the camera work in this film is acceptable because they do get a lot of great angles and they do use the space in a lot of interesting ways. It's just the same space though, so you can't do much with it. So the characters and the plot are really what makes this movie stand out. That's why when I first watched this movie, I was really intrigued. The setup was really interesting. Is it the end of the world, or is it just all in Howard's head? Is he a bad guy, or is he just a misunderstood dickhead? You have no idea throughout the majority of the film, and the start of it really puts these questions forward, and you go, oh damn it, I want to find out what's going to happen. But as the movie went on, I did start to grow a little bored. The pace of the film is very slow, and while there is a lot of tension, it is kind of all over the place and how it's delivered. And honestly, it all has to do with the characters. Michelle is an interesting enough character and was the one I liked the most in the film. She is very resourceful and is quite adept at taking care of herself, almost escaping right at the start of the film. If I was ever in a situation like her, then I hope that I'm just as good and quick-witted as she is. But Emmett is mostly a side character to help with the development of the other two. He is fine and he's just sort of there. He doesn't really do much, he just adds explanation and exposition and humanizes the other two characters a little bit. Howard is a mixed bag, and I consider to be the problem in this film. Howard is a very intense guy, and it is explained that he isn't very friendly, and he's paranoid, and he's into all the conspiracy theories and stuff, so he doesn't really get along with people. And that is fine. That sets up his character, and that creates most of the tension in the film. Do you trust him, or do you think he's a liar and he's going to kill everybody? That is the whole purpose of his character. But from the very start of the film, I was convinced that he would be the antagonist regardless of what happened in the film, because he doesn't really evolve or change. Throughout the middle of the film, when they all become friendly and, you know, they're all good to each other, he has still got this edge of insanity to him. And because of that, because there's no ebb and flow of can I trust him, can I not, I don't get the sense of him being a very well-rounded character, and I just didn't think that he would be a good guy. I was like convinced from the start that he was going to be the villain, and I'm pretty much right throughout the whole film. He is the antagonist. The whole point of this kind of movie is to second guess these main characters and to figure out what's going on. But I can't really talk about much of it unless I go into spoilers. So most of this video, I bet probably half it's going to be spoilers. So definitely click ahead to whatever time this is to just get to the final answer, like if I think it's worth it or not, because most of this is going to be some rants about spoilers and the movie. So you have been warned. So it turns out that Howard had a daughter that passed away. So he kidnapped another girl to replace her. He is a bad guy. When he takes in Michelle, it's pretty much for the same reason, to have someone to be his daughter during the end of the world, which is also true. That's a fine motivation, but the way the movie handles the reveal and the development of this is piss poor. Like I said, you never truly think that Howard is a good person, so as soon as anything suspicious comes up in the movie, you know it's going to be true. This causes the movie to be a lot more dull than it needs to be. Where the start has a good amount of tension and a good amount of momentum, it then just drags on and it doesn't feel like anything gets accomplished until near the end. Now the final act of the film is quite exciting, where all of it comes to a head. Now that we know Howard is definitely a bad guy and he kills Emmett, so it just solidifies that he is a bad guy. He then tries to make Michelle into something that she's not, and then she tries to escape, meaning that he wants to kill her. It's very, very exciting, and honestly, it's a well shot and well done sequence, but the amount of punishment that Howard goes through makes me question, how can a human keep going? It's really unbelievable. He has this like sixth sense of where she is, and he goes through like acid and like explosions and all that kinds of stuff, and he survives a lot of it. It's really, really ridiculous, and it kind of takes me out of the movie that was going for a much more realistic tone. But even though this is the big head of that story, it's actually not the end of the movie. So where I was like, oh, okay, the end of the world has happened and it's a bit mysterious, and I didn't think we were going to find out much about it, after you get through this Howard plot, which kind of feels like a sort of a side story towards the end, because even though it's supposed to be the main thing, you just didn't believe it. The very little bit right at the end is very different. Where I thought the movie would end with Howard's death and then Michelle getting out of the bunker, either dying straight away or learning that the world hasn't ended, or learning that the world has ended in a very quick, short scene. That's not the case. There is a good amount of the film that is set directly after the bunker, and it's drastically different from the rest of the film. It has to do with aliens. So it turns out that aliens have come to conquer the Earth or something like that. I'm not really sure, it's kind of a bit vague, but they are doing massive damages to the Earth, and Michelle actually fights one of the aliens and kills it and blows up one of their spaceships. It's ridiculous. Because she's been set up as this really crafty, smart person and quick-witted, I actually believe her doing this, and it's a really fun experience, and it's so much more fun than what most of the movie was before it, which actually lets down the rest of the film. Where I could have accepted that Howard was the bad guy, maybe had a little bit more plot development instead of this alien thing just feels really fun, and I wanted to see more of that, so it made the rest of the film go, ugh, what a drag. The last thing I want to talk about is the fact that 10 Cloverfield Lane was never meant to be a sequel to the original Cloverfield. J.J. Abrams had this idea of creating the Cloververse with movies that would be interconnected into the story, but he actually finds a script for a different movie and then just adds his few little Cloverfield touches to it. 10 Cloverfield Lane was not a movie that was meant to be a Cloverfield sequel, he just turned it into one, and it's really evident because there's no Cloverfield monster, it doesn't mention any of the stuff from the original Cloverfield, aside from a few sight things like the slushos and a few other little details. You don't really see a connection between this movie and the first one, aside from the ARG, which has a lot of connections, which is really cool, and it like makes the world a lot more fleshed out. But really, this movie is kind of a standalone in the Cloververse. In my opinion, I think that 10 Cloverfield Lane is not worth it. It has so much potential. The start of the film has such an intriguing plot. Is Howard a bad guy? Is it the end of the world? Is the things that are happening really happening? And you really feel for Michelle and her circumstances. But as the movie goes on, it starts to drag, especially towards the middle, where it doesn't become a believable story, it just becomes one that's just plodding along. I never believed that Howard was going to be anything but an antagonist, and that is a crucial part to a movie like this, where there's only 3 main characters and the plot is so centralized. It has to have an interesting dynamic and growth. Howard doesn't grow, Emmett doesn't grow, Michelle doesn't grow. She changes a little bit, but honestly she doesn't grow. There is no growth from the beginning of the film to the end of the film. Well, there is a little bit for Michelle, but that was in the spoilers section, so yeah. But the whole point of the film was to tell an intriguing story and a bottled story that has 3 interesting characters, and it failed. It didn't really live up to my expectations, and as a Cloverfield movie, it still didn't live up to my expectations. While I don't think the movie is horrible or bad, I just don't think it was worth it. So tell me what you guys thought about 10 Cloverfield Lane, and did you think it was a real Cloverfield movie or not? I don't think so, but I like the idea of the Cloververse having different movies in it, and it's just sort of loosely connected. That's an interesting idea. I really love the idea of an ARG, and if I was to ever create a movie or a series or anything like that, I'm gonna use an ARG, most definitely. I think it's a really cool idea and a really cool concept, so that's just me. But what did you guys think of 10 Cloverfield Lane? Did you believe Howard was going to be anything but an antagonist? Did you like Michelle? Did you like the story? You know, write it all down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!